Today's Shir Be'ez Hashem is Masechta Menachos Daf Vav 96, and we will begin on the Mishnah on Daf Vav Amid Aleph. Okay, the Mishnah begins. Chavite Kohen Gadol, the carbon mincha that the Kohen Gadol brought every day, which was baked in a machvas. That's what it's. We saw what type of pan that is in the oven, and he had to bring it every single day, and he divided one isarin into two parts, and half he brought in the morning, and half he brought in the afternoon, and he brought it on the mizbeach, which is thrown onto the mizbeach. It was baked. It was a baked type of mincha. So the Mishnah says lishasan varichasan, the kneading of the dough and the shaping it into different chalas. We call chalas, but really it's never baked as chametz. Vafiyasan, and the baking of this mincha bifnim was done inside the Beis Hamikdash. B'doiches es Shabbos, it overrided the Shabbos. Why? Because once you did the measuring out of this type of, according to the way the Mishnah, once you measured it out, it automatically became Kodesh. So you could not bake it on Friday for the Minchas Chavitin that he was going to bring on Shabbos, because on Friday night, by Shabbos morning already, it would be possibilino. So you had to bake it on Shabbos. However, Tchinasan, the grinding, V'hakadasan, and the sifting of the flour to create the dough, Eina Doichas Shabbos, that will not override the Shabbos. Klal Amar Rabbi Kiva. Kiva gave you a general rule. Kol melech Shabbos. Any type of work that could be done prior to Shabbos, Eina Doichas Shabbos, cannot override the Shabbos, such as grinding and sifting. Since it's possible to do it Erev Shabbos, and it would not invalidate the mincha, so therefore would not override the Shabbos. You have to do it on Friday. If it was type of things that you could not do on Erev Shabbos, such as the baking of the chavitim, this brittle matzah, the reason is that if you baked it on Friday, by Shabbos morning, it would be possibilina, because it had to be baked in a kli sharis. Doiches the Shabbos, it would override the Shabbos. So the chavite Kohen Gadol, the Mishnah says, had to be baked, it had to be made in a kedusha dega kalim of the Beis Hamikdash. But every mincha, we said it does not have to be made in a kedusha dega keli. However, if you're going to prepare it inside the Beis Hamikdash, you have to use a keli. Kol hamenachos yesh b'masa kli b'fnim. If you're going to make it inside the Beis Hamikdash, you're going to prepare it, you have to use a vessel. You can't mix, you can't, let's say, knead it on the floor of the or just on a table. Probably had to be in a bowl, because if you in the Beis Hamikdash, you have to use the vessels of the Beis Hamikdash. The ein ben masa kli b'chutz. But if you're outside the Beis Hamikdash, you don't have to use necessarily a vessel, and we'll see the source of that in the Gemara. Okay, that's what Rashi. That's what the okay. So now the Mishnah says shtei halechem. Now I want you to shtei halechem. Arkon shiva tvachim v'rachman dalet tvachim v'kanei seha arboa etzbos. So let's see a picture. The shtei halechem, the length, and you have the width of the shtei halechem, and then you have corners of the shtei halechem, which you can see over here. The corners of these things. So what is the length? What is the size of the width? How do they bake it? So the Mishnah says the length was 7 tvachim, the width was 4 tvachim, and the corners popped up 4 fingers. Lechem aponim, arkon yud tvachim. The length of the lechem aponim was 10 tvachim. Brachman hey tvachim was the width was 5 tvachim. V'karner sel sheva etzbois, and the corners were 7 fingers. So let's just say a picture of the shulchan. But before we do that, of the lechem aponim, let's just go over what the shulchan looked like. Shulchan was a table. As you can see, it was a table. They plated it in gold, but it was a regular table, and they put a flat board on it. Then they put a crown around it. We'll call that a mascaris. We're going to discuss that later today, as you can see. Then they had these these side posts which had half a straws in them. Okay, that the menachios is the boards, the side boards, and the kesavos were half straws that was in between each bread, and it looked like a half straw to allow air to come in. And this is how the shulchan looked, one side of the shulchan, and we're going to discuss the bread in a moment. But the table went underneath and it held up the bread. So here's one side of the shulchan being held up the bread. There is 2 spoons on the shulchan. There's a question where you put the 2 spoons full of frankincense. Do you put it on top of the breads or do you put it in between the breads? We're going to discuss that later. But here is what we're discussing right now. The lechem upon him had a length of 10 tvachim. You see the width is 5 tvachim. The corners were 7 etzba'os. When they somehow, after they baked it, they were able to, or they folded it to look like this. So it's 5 tvachim. The height was 2.5 tvachim, according to one opinion, and then it looked like a box, 5 tvachim. And this was the mold that it was placed in, and this is how it looked after you baked it. Then we have, okay, this we saw already, the machlokes between how it looked, lechem upon him. According to one opinion that we saw yesterday, which we're not going to go with, is that it looked like a boat or a rocking boat, as you can see, according to Taisus and Rashi. And this is how the shulchan looked when it's completed. In this opinion held that the spoons went in between the 2 stacks of 6 loaves. So now let's read the Mishnah. Lechem upon him, orkim yud tvachim. The length of the lechem upon him was length of 10 tvachim, v'rachman 8 tvachim. The width was 5 tvachim, karnoisav sheva atzbois, and its fingers, the corners were 7 fingers. Rabbi Yehuda says, Shloi tita, I'll make you a simon not to make a mistake. Zadad zayin dalad was the shtei lechem, which is shiva tvachim, dalad tvachim, and 4 etzbois, and Yahaz was the lechem upon him, which was length of 10, 5 width, and 7 etzbois. Then Ben Zaymer says, Oimer nosata lashucha lechem haponim lefonai tamid. Lechem haponim shohayu leiponim. It says in the pasuk that it's called the bread of faces. Faces can mean corners. So the face of the shulchan, the face of the lechem had 2 parts to it. It had sides, walls, and it also had corners. That's what you can see in the picture over here. So it had corners and faces. Hashulchan, the table itself, was Orkan Yud, V'rachban Chamisha. Now, the length was 10, and the width was 5. But Lechem upon him, Orkan Yud, V'rachban Hey. The length of the Lechem upon him was 10, and the width was 5. So Noisin Orkoi, you put the length of the lechem upon him across the width of the shulchan. Well, if the width of the shulchan was 5 and the length of the lechem upon him was 10, so you have an overlap, 10 minus 5, of 2.5 tvachim on each side. The koifel tuvchaim umechzer mekan utuvchaim mechechzer mekam nimtza orka memalis rachbei shel shulchan de Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda says by folding it up, as we saw in the picture, you fold it up. The height will be 2.5 tvachim. And it's 5 by 5 now. So therefore, and if you leave this across, so then it filled up the whole bread. There was no space in between the 2 stacks of breads. That's how Rabbi Yehuda learned. So obviously Rabbi Yehuda is going to learn, you put the spoons on the top bread on top. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir says, no, shulchan was a little bit bigger than that. Our shulchan arkin yud beis. The length of the shulchan was 12. The rach bevav, and the width was 6. Lechem upon him, arkin yud v'rach behei. And the lechem upon him is this. They both agree that the lechem upon him was 10 by 5. But the question was, how long was the shulchan? So if the shulchan was a little bit longer, nice and arka connected. Shulchan kaifel to chaim mekan. Since if you're putting the length, if the length of the lechem upon him was 10, and the width of the shulchan was 6, so if we place down the bread, so then it overlaps 2 tvachim on each side. So according to Rameir, the fold was 2 tvachim. Utvachaim revach be'emsa. You fold 2 tvachim by 2 tvachim. So unlike in this picture, which is the opinion of Rabbi Huda, you folded it up only 2 tvachim from here, 2 tvachim from here, and therefore then it took up 10 tvachim on the shulchan. So there's a tvachim revach be'imsa. There was 2 tvachim in the middle, so that the wind should come in between the 2 stacks of bread, and therefore it did not spoil. And Abba Shaul says, Omer, Sham in the space between the 2 stacks of breads, as you saw in the picture, they put the 2 spoons of frankincense, shal lechem upon him. Let's get the picture up. This is I guess you can see it closely. If right over here, they put, according to a mayor, since the shulchan was a little bit longer, they had this space to put the 2 frankincense. So now, Amaloi, so they said to him, but doesn't the pasuk say v'nasata al hamarechas levaina zaka? The Torah in Parshas Emor says right over here, v'nasata al hamarechas, you put on top of the stacks of bread the levaina. So how do you say you put it in between? So the Gemara is going to learn that the word al does not mean in top. Sometimes the word al means next to the stack of bread, which is in between the stacks of bread. That's where you put the levaina. That's what. So that's what he says. Amalai Abba Shaul said, "Harikvan nemav olav mata menashe." So and here you find another place in Chumash where it doesn't mean it's on top of. Next to them was mata menashe, the shevet menashe. So v'nasata al hamarechas means next to the stack of loaves. That's where you put the spoons, but not on top. Then the Mishnah says, "Babos nifin shazav hayu sham ufutzal m'shem shoyisayim chebehem shnaim l'sei dezeh or shnaim l'sei dezeh." So you had two side posts. Okay, as you can see, 2 on each side. You can't see the far side of it, but there's another post like these on the other side. And now the Mishnah is going to say they had these half straws that was in between each bread. For some reason, let's learn that when they took the breads out on Shabbos and they put in new breads, they couldn't fasten the half straws, the pipes, back into the shulchan. Maybe it's Rashi says it's like building. It's almost a building. You're connecting something. So on Shabbos they couldn't do it. So it's like if your lens of your glasses pops out, you can't pop it back in on Shabbos. So it's like a building. So therefore, what they do with those half pipes, so the half pipes here's the half pipes. They put it on the side of the base of the shulchan on Shabbos, and Matzah Shabbos they fasten them back in between the breads. So they took these pipes out. Now, if you count up each pipe, you have 1, 2, 3, 6. You have 14 on each side. This is 12 plus 2 is 14. I guess the top one you only needed 2, and the rest needed 12. So that's where you get the number 14. So Varbos Nifim, Shnaim says Chavches Konim, you have 28 rods, Kechatzi Koni Cholo, like a half a straw. Abba sliced down the lengthwise. Abba will say the Zeva, Yudah will say that, and you have 14 on each stack of loaves. Loy sider akonim v'loy nitilosim doicha Shabbos. You can't fasten these pipes on Shabbos or take them out. Ella nichnas me'erev Shabbos. Friday they took it. V'shaimtay they took it apart. V'nois la'arka shulchan, and they put it on the length of the shulchan. And then Matzah Shabbos, after they put the new bread on, Matzah Shabbos, they put these pipes. And again, the purpose of the pipes was to allow space between each bread so they don't spoil. It was an ace anyway that they didn't go hard, but also to allow space so that it also doesn't crush it, because the weight of these breads were pretty heavy. They were made with 10 pounds, so they were heavy on each other. So in order to allow space in between and not crush them, they put these rods in, but they didn't put it in on Shabbos. They put it in on Matzah Shabbos. Kol hakelim shoy b'migdash la'arkan la'arkan shel bayis. The Mishnah says that every keli in the base of Migdash, as you can see, was put lengthwise towards east to west. So here's a picture of the Oren. Let's say the menorah, it went from east to west. You see the menorah over here, and the shulchan was also placed in such a way that it was from east to west. It wasn't placed on its width. So that's what the Mishnah says. All the kalim, the base inside that sanctuary, was arkan l'arkan shabayis, and lined up with the length of the sanctuary. So now the Mishnah says, we call him menachos yesh ben ma'aseh kli b'fnim. Right, that we explained that if you're going to make the mincha, let's say you donated a mincha and you decide you want to prepare it inside the Beis Hamikdash, then you have to use a keli. Shalus Rabbi Zumenain. How do I know that that's the case? Because Rabbi said, there's a pasuk in Yecheskel who saw the vision of how the third Beis Hamikdash is going to look. The he was shown in a vision the place where the kahanim are going to cook the chatas and the asham, and they're going to bake the mincha over there. And therefore, mincha dumi the asham chatas. The mincha had to be similar to the asham chatas, just like the asham chatas. My asham chatas tunin kli, they had to be cooked, and there's no way to cook without using a vessel. You use a pot to cook. They used to cook the asham chatas. They're going to cook the asham chatas in the third temple. Af mincha name tunikeli. So also the mincha had to be made in a vessel. It had to be made in an oven not connected to the ground. Also, and also when you're kneading it, I guess you had to use a keli. You couldn't just knead the dough on the ground, but only if you're making it in the Beis Hamikdash. Hashulchan Arkan Asare. Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said, if you're going to learn like the picture, like Rabbi Yochanan is going to say, according to the opinion that the height of the lechem upon was 2.5. So you multiply 2.5 by 6, right? 2.5 by 6. It was the height of the kedusha of that. The height of the kedusha of that shulchan is 15 tvachim, right? It's 15 tvachim. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Divrei Yomet Tevachayim Mechza Koifel Nimtza Shulchan Mekadesh Chamisha Asa Tvachim Lamal. Then the height of the holiness of the shulchan was 15 tvachim. So according to that opinion, if you suspend something on top of the shulchan within that 15 tvachim, it becomes automatically holy. The Divrei Yomet Tevachayim Koifel, according to the opinion of Rabbi Meir, that they only folded it 2 tafechs. Nimtzo shulchan mekadesh yud beis tvachim. So it's 6 times 2. So the height was only 12 tvachim lamala. So the height basically of the shulchan was either 12 tvachim up top, or according to Rabbi Yehuda, it was 15. Says the Gemara v'ika kanim, but wasn't the height increased because there's the bars in between the breads? And says the Gemara, kanim shkuyi mishakal lahu. The bars were embedded into the bread itself. There was like an indentation on the bottom of the bread, so you could slip the bars in. My tama. So what's the purpose of the bars? Because we don't want the breads to spoil. If they're sticking to another bread, they're going to spoil. Says the Gemara, but again, the bread is going to spoil if it's going to stick to the bar itself. And says the Gemara, it's a little bit off the bar. It's not totally flush with the bar. The indentation was that the bar gave a drop of space. So then each bread wasn't exactly 15. It didn't reach 15 tvachim height. It had a little space between each bread, which increased the height. And since it's not such a big amount higher than 15 tvachim, so we didn't count it. So basically, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the height of the shulchan was 15 tvachim, and therefore you could put according to Rabbi, you put the 2 spoons on top, and anything that you put within that 15 tvachim is going to be holy. Says the Gemara v'yikim bezichim. Either doesn't the vezichim goes on top of the bread? So according to Rabbi Yehuda, the vezichim was height, let's say a tefach, so maybe it's 16 tvachim. Answers the Gemara, begavi de lechem havi yasri. They put the two spoons in the breads. So if it's in the breads, it's not taking up space and height. That's where it stayed. Says the Gemara v'ika kronis, but what about the fingers? Answers the Gemara, kronis legavi lechem karfanei v'lechem aleya nachlei. As you can see in the picture, the kronis were folded inwards. It's not that they were up. The kronis were folded inwards, the corners, right? These corners were folded inwards, and therefore they didn't take up any space, and the next bread was on top of that bread, as you can see in the picture. Now, the Gemara asks another question. Well, Ika Marskartoi, isn't there a frame on the, one of the first things we showed was that there was a frame. There was a frame located by these shulchans, right? There was a frame on top, and the Gemara thought that the frame was bent inwards, and they put the breads on top of that, so the frame itself took up another space. Answers the Gemara, you can learn that the frame, the frame was underneath. And if you want to learn that the frame was on top, it was tilted outwards. It tilted outwards, the frame, and the bread stayed exactly on the table. Wasn't on the frame. It was tilted outwards, downwards. Like we learned in a Brisa. Rabbi Yossi says, it did not have sideboards. Rabbi Yossi was opinion you didn't even need these sideboards on the shulchan. You didn't need any sideboards on the shulchan. Basically, you didn't need any side. Just this, I guess, this masgaras came up a little bit, and then you stack the breads one on top of another. But Amalai, no, they told him the frame was underneath, so nothing held the sides of the bread. So the breads needed another four supports, two for each stack, and therefore they agreed. But you see, there's a machlokes where were the frames, on top of the bread, on top of the table, or underneath the table. Now, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, new Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan said, if you're going to learn that the frame was underneath, tavla hamasapeches tameya. You see, if you look at the table itself, if you're going to learn that this frame was underneath, let's say on the bottom over here, on the bottom, let's just make it red. So let's say the frame was over here, right? If the frame was over here, then all you have is the top table, and there's no base kibble. And yet this top flat board could become tummy, because potentially if you hollowed it out, you see a flat board, generally a flat piece of wood doesn't mekabel tuma unless it has a receptacle in it. But the shulchan was mekabel tuma, so but it's just a flat board. So one can argue that potentially, since it's very thick and potentially could have a receptacle, so therefore it would be mekabel tuma. So Rabbi Yochanan said, if you're going to find a very thick board like this, it would be mekabel tuma. If you have a board that flips over and you use it on both sides, so it could be mekabel toma. But if you're going to learn that the mascaras was on top, then I'm not sure. Because if you learn that the mascaras was on top, like you see in this picture, so I'll tell you why the table was mekabel toma, because it has a receptacle, because the mascaras, the crown around it, was a protection, so you could pour something of water into this and it'll hold, because it's a receptacle. So therefore, a flat board, I'm not sure. So Michlal, Rabbi Yochanan deduced that the Shulchan bar Kabuli Tumahu, the Shulchan was definitely Mekabel Tumah. So the Gemara says, why would the Shulchan be Mekabel Tumah? Kli'eta also lenachasu, chol kli'eta also lenachas Mekabel Tumah. The shulchan was supposed to stay in one place, never supposed to be moved around. And it's like standing heavy furniture that's not makabel tuma. Any piece of wood, even if it has a receptacle, if it's not meant to move around like a coffee cup, it's not makabel tuma. My tama dum desak. It should be like a sack. The Torah tells you that a sack is makabel tuma. Masak, just like a sack, a knapsack, metalto mole v'rekim. You can carry it whether it's empty or full. Avkol metalto mole v'rekim. So also the types of things that are makabel tuma is only if you can carry it when it's empty or and when it's full. If you have a bookcase that's full of bookcase connected, that's very heavy, you're not going to carry it, and therefore it's not makabel tuma because it's not movable. Says the Gemara says, and the Shulchan carried these breads. It was very heavy. And says the Gemara, Shulchan nami metal tamoli breaking. The Shulchan was actually moved around, and they used the poles to move it around. Kiddur Rish Lakish. Let's see, they used the poles to carry it and move it around. Kiddur Rish Lakish, like Rish Lakish said. By the way, here's the miskeres. It was tilted outwards. But according to some, the miskeres was on the bottom. Anyway, here it is. The Shulchan was carried around. So the question is, why was it carried? Kiddur Shlokish, like Rish Lakish taught us. Rish Lakish might exiv al Shulchan atar. The Shulchan should be not tuma. Tar mechaldi katame. So tar implies that the table could become tame. Elam Lami, it teaches you that it wasn't meant to be staying in one place. They would carry the Shulchan to the base inside the base of Mikdash where the people were. They took it out of the sanctuary and carried it around the base of Mikdash where the people stood. And they would show the people, hey, take a look at the Shulchan, it has bread. And they would tell to the Jewish people, see how special you are and beloved you are by the Eibishter. Like according to Rabbi Shua ben Levi said, the Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi said, Neis Gadol nasa belechem upon him. There was a Neis Gadol that was made with the lechem upon him, silukai kisidurai, that when you took it off, it was the same like when you just put on the breads, and it was just as hot. They took off hot bread like the day they took it off. Put hot bread and it should be as hot as the day you're going to take it off. So therefore, that was so that basically they carried the Shulchan around, even in the base of Mikdash. And therefore, because of that, the Shulchan's Makabel Tumah, because it's something that's a movable item and it's holding the breads. Therefore, the Shulchan is Tameh. Says the Gemara, mishum tzipui. Let us say that the Shulchan should be Tameh, not because you carry it around, but because it's covered with gold, and gold does not need a receptacle. A gold is a type of metal. Even a flat piece of metal could be Mekabel Toma. Didn't we learn in the Mishnah that you always follow the covering? Rabbi Yehuda, Omer, Mokam, Chanachas, Kentichas. Type of adult baki is something made out of leather. You eat on it, and you covered it with. It became. You covered it with stone, so then it wouldn't be mekabel tuma. If you leave a place where you're going to put cups on it, it's tameim, right? So so you go after the shear makom. So shear and loy shear loy. Okay, we're going to stop over here. But the bottom line is that the Gemara is asking another question. We're going to stop right over here. Because I don't want to go too far. But the bottom line is the Gemara is saying, what do you have to say? It's Mekabel Tuma because they moved it around. They should say it's Mekabel Tuma because it was covered with gold. And then the Gemara is going to ask a couple of questions on that. Okay. I'll go to Nacht and I'll go to Erev Shabbos.